Coaches, how do you plan and review effectively for a game? Do you just roll into a game with an idea of what you want to do, or have you really thought through a lot of details? And I'm talking beyond just the scout, beyond just the strengths and weaknesses of your opponent, beyond just your own tactical game plan. To what extent have you really considered all the different aspects that are going to go into not just the team and players' performance, but your performance as a coach? This is episode 16 of the Don't Tell Me, Show Me podcast. This week I'm joined by Alan Keane, who's going to talk us through the game plan of his most recent game. So it's fresh. It was only just a few days ago. So Alan, thanks for joining me. Talk me through this game. What was your preparation looking like? Give me the context.
Uh, Preparation started by being aware of opposition. Because the plan we'll put in place generally at our level will be context based. So we're trying to be very intentional about planning for maximizing our strengths versus the opposition we're going against. Are they still our strengths? Are our strengths our strengths?
Hmm.
Depending on opposition, but also planning ahead for what we expect their strengths to be. So it really depends on the opposition, Simon, but there's an intentionality around planning for that. And again, it's context based. And we can get into the detail of that in a moment.
Well, in this case, I know you were playing against a team that you were the underdog. They're quite quick and athletic. And I know your team is quick and athletic, but the opponent was probably a bit longer, a bit taller. So in that case, their strengths were also your strengths. So how did you approach that when their strengths might be too much for your strengths? Like, do you try and change something, or are you just going to double down? Like, because this wasn't a clash of styles, if I remember correctly from the game. This was two similar styles, but the opponent team had basically bigger and longer athletes.
Well, it starts with an acceptance and going in there and accepting, we can do what we can do. And again, regardless whether we go fire with fire and that's all we have, we're going to fulfill that to the best possible way we can. So we were aware. We scouted that team. We watched their individual player scout. We watched their team scout, albeit a new team. So it was a bit of a blind scout in terms of team, but watching the players, we knew what to expect. We knew that they'd have five guys on the floor that could shoot the three. We knew they'd have athletic rebounding guards. We knew that they'd have a good transition team, all the stuff that we're trying to be good at in our league. And what you forgot to mention is they were a lot deeper than us. You go
Mm.
down the end of our bench, we've got some under 18s and some veteran players still hanging on to the sun at the end of the evening. So they were deeper with quality. But it was the conversations I was having with the players, is we've got to put a big focus on us and fulfilling our potential with what our strengths are and not shifting gears and try to be radical and change things now just because that team's strengths are similar to ours. Because and if we had done that, what would we have changed it to?
Mm.
There wasn't a magic potion available that was suddenly going to allow us and enable us to play a different style of game. If there was, we'd be doing that more frequently. But we don't have the tools and we don't have that's why I said that you go back to acceptance. We don't have the tools, we don't have the depth and the experience and the versatility to shift gears based on the opposition. It was a case of, right, can we maximize our strengths, play to our strengths fully, whatever fully is, because it's never 100% at a time. And then can we hope that we can limit their strengths and then see what the balance is at the end and then accept the outcome. But the focus went back on us, even though we scouted, prepared, went through their players' strengths and potential opportunities that we could exploit. The focus on the day was very much on ourselves and staying true to our strengths.
So how did you approach this? Like, what was your
Mm.
coaching intention? Like, I know from working with you in the past that you go into every game aware of and having intentionally planned for like who you're going to be in that game. Are you going to be demanding? Are you going to be relaxed? Are you going to be trying to breathe confidence into them, like rather than just letting that play to chance. It's kind of tricky situation here because it was a really competitive game. Likelihood of you winning was low, but you didn't want to maybe accept, you don't want to kind of accept low standards, accept losing, accept poor performance. But then on the other hand, you had got to coach with that reality in mind. And if the players are, if you pump them up too much, like, oh, we're going to win this game, then the bubble bursts and they fall apart during the game. Like that's a tricky balance.
I read a fantastic book years ago, sorry, in response to this question by a gentleman. He's passed now, American football coach named Bill Walsh. Title of the book is "The Score Takes Care of Itself,"
Hmm.
and that's my. I try for that to be my approach every game, and that's going to be the outcome of the process that we're putting in. And whether it's a bigger picture over the course of a season or it's a micro moment in a game or a period or a quarter, then I believe in that process quite strongly. And what if I now go back to your original question is how did I approach the game? I reflect often on who we have, like who the players are, what their abilities are, how do they play to their strengths? What kind of coach do I need to be in order for them to play to their strengths? So the first thing I'm doing, and I'm going to read off it if you don't mind, because I have it here, my pre-game sheet. I wrote down, if I could read it verbatim so the listeners might get a better picture. I wrote down, in response to how should I think and act this game, I wrote down calm, but a focused demeanor. So I'm not accepting that we're going to lose. That's not a thought I hold on to. I'm calm, but I'm focused on the game plan. I'm focused on what we need to be and who we need to be, starting with myself. And I want the players to feel that as we go through the game. So I'm not coaching here going, oh, we're going to lose, so everything's all right, or we throw in the towel. I'm focused on what we agreed the game plan would be with the players. But I'm doing it in a calm, measured way. The second thing I wrote down on the second line is identify key moments to disrupt the rhythm of the game. Aware that they're fast, aware that they're very dynamic, aware that they could go on a 12-0 run very easily with the strengths they have. I plan for identifying those moments and trying to disrupt that rhythm intentionally, and in the form of three different ways. One, call a timeout to break the rhythm of that game. Two, foul to stop the flow. So tactical fouling. We have a couple of players who are very smart at this. Will is very clever at that. He's experienced at that. Ewan's very experienced and clever at that. So again, communicating it to the guys that can that can follow through in that, and being mindful of those who that would be new to them. So I'm not going to put them in that position. And then the third thing was switching defenses. When do we go from man to zone? Zone press back to half court zone press back to man. And then we also switched ball screen coverages from, being in touch, high drop into switching. So that was the second thing, just identifying those moments, right? We need to break the rhythm of them right now. So that's how I was planning for myself.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm hearing you intentionally wrote down how you wanted to be, how you wanted to think and act in that game, and you're talking about being calm with a focused demeanor and disrupting moments. What strikes me there is that gives you something to review against. So now your review gets easier because of your planning. So after the game, you can ask yourself, how did I do against those two things? So there's no revisionist history going on because you set your intention and you wrote it down on a piece of paper and you shared it with other people. So what sprung up in your review? Like to what extent were you able to meet that intention?
Well, I scored myself out of 6, as our framework allows you to, and I gave myself a 4, which is probably a safe space actually. And I'd be interested to hear you came in, you saw me coach the second half of that game. I wonder, what score would you give me out of 6 in terms of my coaching targets? And then I wrote a one-liner that I wasn't consistent with the rhythm changer. I lost focus on it, particularly in the second half. So upon reflection, as I filled out that quick review and asked myself, what would I do differently next time? Actually go back to that at halftime, which I didn't do. I often do, but I didn't do this game, and remind myself what I wanted my coaching to be. I lost that in the second half. It wasn't a focus. The calm but focused demeanor, I felt I did well. It was a challenging game for our players. There was moments that they were getting a bit disturbed with the referee, but I didn't compound that by also being conflicting with the referee. So I think for the most part, I was calm and I was quite measured with my demeanor on the sideline. And then upon further reflection, because these reflections are not a one-off thing, Simon, I don't, oh, I've done the reflection, I've ticked that box, move on. The thoughts come back to you in different moments. The following day, I was thinking, don't know if I had enough energy in that game. I'm not sure I coached with the right level of energy in key moments that might have had us a bit sharper. And now I need to be very clear on the definition of energy. It doesn't mean shouting or screaming across the court. It doesn't mean being more demonstrative from the sideline. With energy, I mean is a sharpness in the timeouts, an efficiency and effectiveness of communication. Maybe quicker with certain rotations, certain subs. I'm not sure. The following day, upon reflection, I felt I didn't coach with enough energy in that game. So my point being here, I'm trying to double down on is I don't just do the reflection and it's done. I write out my reflections in the post game review, but as time goes, they can be added to and often are.
Yeah, my observation of your coaching in that game was the players had energy that they didn't lack for playing hard. So
Yeah.
you bringing energy out, they didn't need energy from you. They had it now. Focus, commitment, like being in the moment. That was the difficult thing because when you're stepping up a level and you're the underdog, you, you can come out of a timeout or you can come out at the beginning of each half and be really focused because you've talked about it and you're really intentional about it as a player. But it's the middle of halves, the middle of quarters. That's the difficult thing. Like, and can you sustain it when you're a little bit tireder? So I wonder, on reflection, is there anything you could have done in those kind of in between moments?
Yeah, they're the moments I'm referring to. Like when I say coaching with more energy, it's not projecting energy onto the players. It's being sharper with substitutions to change in those moments, to affect those moments in maybe a more positive way. Calling a timeout in key moments. I feel like, to say to do that with more energy, I'm probably ready to do that more and I don't wait. I feel like I waited almost like, yeah, right, let it go. Let's see how this plays out. So when I say coach with more energy, it's like, right, just be sharper in those spaces to counter the moments that you clearly identified, and you're absolutely correct.
Mm. Okay, so how do you decide what the performance keys are for a game? Is it all tactical, or is there more to it than that? So, what were your performance keys, and like essentially, what did you tell the players in the pregame? With it,
Mm,
what were the four or five most important things they had to do?
Can I read them out and then go back to the why?
Yeah.
So first one was possession value. It was about ball security, having a KPI with turnover number, and the second one was about defending as a unit, as a team, particularly off ball positioning and anticipation to rotate. And then the third one was about having a tandem between our team defense into our team offense, and that driving our offense, and our offense being for the most part early and in transition. So we just, as an acronym, I wrote down GAPA: get ahead, pass ahead. And then the last two were not tech tack at all, Simon, but they were very much drivers of having a positive tech tack. I had five in total. Number four was emotional control. Where is your attentional focus going? And the discussion we had around that one is key moments of identifying key moments of the game where it could hinder and hurt us if we're not focusing on the right things. And then the last one was about connection. Today is about, because it was a big event, it was a big game, probably one of the bigger games we've had at home in terms of the organization of the event, one of the most talented teams. The opposition was probably one of the most talented teams we've had in that gym in recent years. So I wanted the final point to be today's about we, not me. This is not an opportunity for one player to try to do too much today. It's about collectively as a group being cohesive with the task at hand and just being socially cohesive and backing each other because, it could become a lot of challenge. There could be a lot of challenging moments, which there were. So
Mm.
there were the five keys. The bottom two were solely me. That was all me. Like I decided these based on what I felt was needed today. So emotional control and connection. That was I didn't seek. There was no co-collaboration. There was no involvement of the players. We didn't discuss any of that. I put those in there as staples and foundations for what the other three are, and the other three were tech tac. The other three
But can
came.
I interject though? They
Please
weren't
do.
surprises. Those two I don't think were surprises to your players, because you have it previously emphasized those as performance keys. So it's not like they came out of left field. And you had, although you didn't involve them, in my observation, you didn't involve them during the week in setting those two things necessarily. You had done a lot of background work in previous weeks and in previous communications to set that up.
Well, you go back to your, you've been on here previously talking about culture. And, that being like people like us do things like this. And you were quoting Seth Godwin, I believe.
Seth Godin, yeah.
Seth
People like
Godin.
us do things like this.
Yeah, people like us do things like this. And I think that's what people would notice if they were around us a bit more. Like this isn't an emotional led, we have to win at all costs. And, deliver the first punch and then the second punch. We're not using that kind of language. It's all
Yeah.
about like, we're going to be disciplined with our thinking in action under pressure. And we're going to back each other and try to support each other when we see the humanistic behavior of frustration kick in. We talk about this stuff a lot. So, absolutely no, not new whatsoever. Had I left both of them off, and had a conversation with the guys. Is there anything I left off here? They might have said one of them. Somebody might have said one of them. So yeah, it wasn't new to them at all. It lives inside in a lot of our practices, and I guess this is the hard thing about coaching. When you emphasize that, how can I go out and abuse the referees or question? How can I even question the referee's call? Or in a timeout when the players are communicating, how can I go in there and tell them stop talking and listen to me? When I'm talking about connection as one of the keys to this game. So, because I've been in that environment before, Si, where connection has been a key to the game, and I've been an assistant, and the coach effectively told the players to shut up during the timeout and listen to him. And you go, well, okay, we've just erased that key from the game, I guess.
Yeah.
That's not working. So, yeah, those two are not uncommon whatsoever. But the previous three, so you talk about we put a target as 14 turnovers max. Can we keep it 14 and under? And we talked about how we're going to do that. And this was a discussion during the week in practice. It was a discussion during the video. All right, we know that they'll be aggressive on the ball. We know that they'll play high in the passing lanes. We know that they'll probably hard hedge ball screens based on observing that team last year with that coach. What do we need to do in order to ensure that we don't turn the ball over more than 14 times? It became a conversation, and then it became the practice focus that night. So again, was it co-collaborated from that point of view? Absolutely, absolutely. But me saying to the guys, turnovers are really important, just brought them into the conversation. So I might have brought it to the table, but they very much laid out the table, and we went from there with it. Team defense, we've identified it, us as a team, and the players are very mindful of this based on previous games and discussions, that our team defense can be an Achilles heel for us. Being in the right position at the right time, rotating on time, the next rotation, and then the person that gets beat where they're rotating to. Like just doing that consistently has been a vulnerability for us. So that was an easy one for all of us to have a shared understanding and agreement. And then the GAPA, get ahead, pass ahead. That's our style of play anyway. So that was just chosen based on, right, this is our strength. Can we do it to the best of our ability today and score 40% of our points in transition?
Mm.
So nothing new, nothing left field, nothing out of the ordinary, no secret sauce, no magic potion. Oh, their strengths are our strengths, but they're better. No, we're not going to change anything. We're going to double down on what we're able to do. We're going to accept that this is our strengths. These are the things we're able to do. We're going to try to do them to the best we've ever done them.
Yeah.
And we'll try that again tonight when we play later on this evening. We won't change it much. Like we might have a tactic. Like I said to the guys last night in practice, we may change something, but it won't be for a picture of the game. It will be for a moment of the game. The story of the game will always be what it'll be with the group I have this year because that's I'm doubling down on their strengths. But tonight we will do something slightly different for one, two, three, four key moments of the game out of a timeout, for example. But that's not our identity. That's not what we're building this team's identity upon because that's not our strength.
Okay, so a couple of episodes ago, we talked with Mark about coach profiling. We gave the five S's. One of them was style. And we used Stephen Rollnick's model of the fixer, the follower, and the guide. So when you look back on the week of coaching that you just did, culminating in that
Mm.
game, can you identify moments when you were in any of those three styles and which was most prevalent?
I I dipped my toe into all three. I sat in all three. Yeah, and I think if you've sat next to me plenty of times. I probably sit in all three to some degree in most games, or I would say because coaching, Simon, is contextual and it's situational. And sometimes this thing I keep it in my pocket and I don't take it out because if I keep putting, I'm going to come back to the question, but this relates to it. If I keep putting my head down to this and back up, the situational awareness I miss. I'm losing something here. So, in order for me to be situationally aware, then I may have to go into a fixer mode at times. So, for example, on the weekend, we were defending ball screen coverages a certain way. Kwame, one of our players who was defending the screener, I noticed he was out of position. There was a trend. It was two, three times in a row. We got lucky twice. We got punished once. I called a timeout and I had to go straight to fixer mode there because there seemed to be a bit of uncertainty because it was a situation where it wasn't the point guard and a traditional forward. It was a forward and a forward setting the pick. And you could tell he's confused between switching or staying in the coverage we agreed. So I had to go to fixer mode because he was gray. As Mark would say, he's in a gray space and we can't have any gray in those moments. So that was fixer. Guide in terms of time, in terms of how I go there and how I went there on the weekend. Let's go back to the timeouts, forms of questioning. And sometimes guide is just sitting back, like they're coming in already discussing. Get out of the way, maybe prompt with another question, or actually clarify in the conversation because there's a disconnect between two people. I found myself in that space, so I'm back to fixer mode there. And then in the same time out, I might be back to guide asking a question. Right? We've done like first 5 minutes. We've done a great job. We've done something really, really, really impressive out here. And if we can sustain it for 40, we got a really good chance to play at our best. What is it? And about six, seven voices, including subs behind me, telling me, "Oh, we're rebounding as a team. All five guys are crashing the defensive boards. Great," which we were. Allowed us actually the domino effect or the tandem allowed us to fast break. We went 11-4 up as a result of that one thing, identifying the source. But I did that in a guiding fashion.
Yeah, yeah. And then at times I noticed, particularly in the second half, you did some of your timeouts were quite tactical, really quite focused. But I've noticed something really interesting with you. Sometimes when the team is losing its focus or the scoreboard's starting to get away from the team, you go into a tactical mode. And sometimes I'm wondering, like, why are you talking about that? And I realized in listening to you sometimes that sometimes you're just giving them a focus. It almost didn't matter what tactical thing you gave them. You just got their minds off of the emotion of the game slipping away from them and on to a tactical focus. Is that accurate, or am I interpreting
I
it too much?
well, you've hit the nail on the head. I've got it wrong last year, and I regret it. We lost the game we never should have lost. We were playing poor, and players were getting frustrated. They were disconnecting. Their focus was going everywhere but what we should have been doing as a team. To the referees, to each other, like you should have got out to that rotation, so on. And I remember saying to, I think it was yourself or somebody else after that game, I should have, on reflection, in the timeouts, I should have spent less time trying to pull them back in 60 seconds. Well, 40 seconds by the time you get them in and out. I should have spent less time on trying to reconnect them and just gone, right, here's change tactics. Just change tactics completely. So their mind now has to go, right. oh, we're not used to doing that, or we haven't done loads of that. Bang, I have to focus on it if we're going to do it well. And I often go to that space. I'm going to make this tactical because I'm trying to steal your attention back over in this
Mm,
direction. Doesn't always work, and you got to go back into the fixer mode of like just being honest about what it is. We played a team last year and we had people in there observing our timeouts and our halftime team talks and stuff. And when I read the report after, one of the things he said, this coach helped that team win. And one of his main points of emphasis was in the moment it was needed most, he was very directive and basically grabbed the bulls by the horn, and the players had no choice but to listen because it was very assertively delivered.
mm.
So, different ways to refocus their attention. And I think you need to know your team inside out in order to which button to press because you can become very directive and pulling them in very forcefully. Think you're pulling them in, but you're actually pushing them away. So it's again,
Mm.
which you go back to the situational awareness, what's needed now, based on my understanding of them in that moment. But your question, your observation is correct. Pull
Yeah,
the focus
that's
back in,
that's
changing tactics.
that is so interesting that you're using a completely different focus to shift the attention. So there's an issue with social cohesion, for example, but instead of addressing that, you're essentially just changing the subject, which might work in some situations or might work short term. And then maybe that buys you enough time. Maybe that gets you to half time, for example, and then you can address the social cohesion at half time, or it gets you to the end of the game. And then, you know, at the next practice, you can address the social cohesion. So that's a counterintuitive approach, or at least to me, because I would want to fix the social cohesion issue. I'd want to say if there's an issue between two players, I would be inclined to address that between those two players in the timeout and actually just kind of have it out with them, or hey, let's get to the bottom of this issue right now so that we can move on. And I'm sure you've done that before, but in this case, you've done the counterintuitive thing and changed the subject.
Well, actually, I observed you coaching a team doing it as well as I've ever seen anybody do it at halftime. And that's when you've got 15 minutes, well, probably by the time you get in 12, 13 minutes to address disconnect between players, emotional led behavior. When you've got time to address it, there is nothing else to address other than that. Like the tactics won't not going to serve anybody well. But when you've got 40 to 60 seconds in a timeout to reconnect two players, sometimes the easiest way is to change focus. And like you said, we're going to change conversation completely. And I'm going to say something that's outrageous, or I'm going to say something that's, oh, we like giving them an offense they've never seen before.
Hmm.
Like we talk about not doing, I'm not in favor of doing that, by the way. But there's a moment where I go, look, you know what? I'm just going to tweak this. And no, instead of you being over there, you're going to be here for this one. Are you listening? Because suddenly everyone's leaning into you and they're not pointing the finger at each other anymore. 40 seconds, you got to do something to put a patch over the bigger problem. The bigger problem's not gone away. I'm just trying to find more time. I'm trying to get to halftime, get to the end of the game. We're going to deal with that bigger problem. Where no one's leaving the facility till that problem's discussed at least, and it's known that it's going to be resolved somehow, some way. But yeah, you got to do what you got to do, man, with the time you've got. And I just find that sometimes works. It's not a solution every time, just for the record.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Okay, so back to our performance keys. How did you review those? Did they stack up in your post-game review? Did you get the performance keys right, or were they wrong? Well, I say wrong, but were they right given the information that you had at the time, and then the game just panned out a little bit different, or were they on the money? Or on reflection, was there any flaws in your process of deciding those performance keys?
Well, the process of deciding the performance keys, I think, was good. The players were brought into it uh, the week before pre-practice with the scouting. We had a discussion of how we're going to, counteract some of these things, how we're going to double down on our strengths. The review was done in a two layered process, two layered format. One, I finished the game, and I fill out the back of my plan to do a review sheet, my game card. I fill out the back of my game card, do that review. I review the keys in terms of might be a couple of words, and then scale of 1 to 6. The second layer brings the players in, and we do a video review. So I put together a video based on the keys. The first thing I put up in the video actually is a reminder to the players, like what the keys to this game were before we start watching the post game video. And the first question, one of the questions I asked them, we did it last night, in fact. One of the questions I asked them was, were these the right keys? Now that we've had the experience, upon reflection, is there anything that we didn't put as a focus that now you've had experience looking back on that would have helped us if it was more of a focus, if it was emphasized more? A few of the players came up with one specific area, and we had a good discussion about it. I didn't agree personally, but I didn't push back in it. But it allowed us to have a rich discussion around, is that a part of the game that deserves to be one of those three keys, or does it fit with inside some of those keys, or is it something that's a baseline minimum expectation that we expect you to do every single time that we didn't do it well on Saturday? So we were having that discussion. And it followed up in practice. Actually, we ended up on the court still talking about that. Like, players don't do that anymore. That we don't drill that, and we don't. That's not a segment of practice. That's never a title of defensive rebounding, Simon. Just for the
Yeah.
listeners, it's never a segment of practice we work on. It's just something we're supposed to be working on in everything we do, but it's not emphasized enough. And I learned something from just walking onto the court last night from some of the players saying we never actually work on this, and it forced me to think, yes, we don't, but I'm still battling the urge to isolate that. But now I understand I definitely need to emphasize it more inside and the bigger picture things we're working on. And then we went through the video based on those keys, and we identified areas that could be better. The players were very good at, I would say overall, if you could compare or measure the time I spoke and the players spoke collectively, we're probably at a balance. If the video was for 10 minutes and people were talking for 10 minutes just for ease, I think I might have spoke for 5, maybe a little bit more. I think they spoke for 5 or maybe a little bit more. The contributions were good. Where I need to be better upon reflection in those sessions is I still feel a need to say something after they say it instead of just saying nothing, just
Yeah.
giving a thumbs up and moving on to the next thing. I found myself last night almost like consolidating the points they were making. Not necessary. But that's how we reviewed it in a nutshell, kind of 2 layers.
Okay. Player focuses. How did you handle that in this game? Did you have one-to-ones with every player? Was that necessary? Did you give them additional focus areas that were outside the performance keys, or how'd you handle that?
So again, go back to the situation and the context. I do it 2 different ways, and it depends on the pressure associated with that game. So I'll go away from Saturday's game. When we play a team we've played previously and we've won big, and the feeling is we're going to win big again, I narrow the focus for every single player, and I'm having one-to-ones with them as they're warming up before they go on the court. This is your focus area. This is priority focus area for you. So Kwame, priority focus areas for you is offensive rebounding. I'll be expecting at least close to 10, if not more, and contact sealing in transition. So winning the race in transition, I need to see evidence of you sealing consistently. Pure narrowed focus for Kwame. The other forwards I'm working with, something different and so on. Now, there's a purpose to that, which will become clear when I tell you what I did on Saturday. Saturday was a very difficult game for us. If you were a betting person, we're not promoting that on this podcast, but if you were a betting person, you would bet that opposition is going to beat us by double digits. 100 out of 100 people would have placed that bet. Just the depth, the talent, the league they're playing, they're a league above us. Because the players are dealing with so much going into that game, I'm not giving them their hyper individual focus. I'm categorizing it. And we did it in the change room pregame. Guards, priority focus areas for you. That's a team. Forwards, priority focus areas for you. And I'm just leaving it at that because they've got enough to deal with. Their cup is so full already
Yeah.
with probably anxiety, confidence, excitement, trying to remember the game keys, trying to remember the scout report, shooter, non-shooter, face up big, back to the basket big, their ball screen coverages, how we're defending Will Neighbors, a pick and pop, we're going to go jamming it under. But on this guy, we're in drop coverage. They have too much to think about in these type of games. So I just categorize it guards and forwards.
Okay. And something to add to that, something that you and I have done, I remember in the past with big games is with player focus areas, is just give them one of their strengths back to them. Just highlight one of their strengths that they already know they've got that they might want to use in this game. So it's not new information, but it's putting them in a hopefully a strengths-based mindset going into the game. Hey, you're really good at this. I've noticed that you've done this particular thing well in previous big games. Do that again today. So it's
Yeah.
not something new. So there's some connection there because sometimes those conversations, when I've watched back the video of myself in a lot of one-to-ones that I did for you last season, some of them were just absolute rubbish in terms of what I said. But the fact that I was making that connection pre-game with that player made them feel important, made them feel valued, gave them a chance to respond or ask me a question. Like sometimes when I do those game one-to-ones, I'll get 2 or 3 questions because there's a question somebody's sitting on that they didn't want to ask in the team setting or just hadn't thought of it and it's just popped into their mind. So sometimes there's just value in the conversation itself, regardless almost of what's been said.
Yeah, I think those touch points are very important. We talk about it's Peter Lonigan, the great Peter Lonigan. I hope he won't mind me saying that. Calls it flight path coaching, and it's a very powerful, effective means of coaching. You basically go say something to somebody positive, and you walk away. As he describes it, praise, prompt, leave, give an affirmation, prompt something they could focus on, and then walk away. But those touch points are really important. Those points of entry, like you talk about coaches wanting to be athlete-centered coaches. Well, how can you do it? What's your point of entry? This could be a great point of entry for any assistant coach or a coach who's new to a team or a coach who's not as confident or a coach who's working with a very powerful, dominant figurehead as a head coach. Right, you get a lot of credibility with these type of touch points with players. And again, another thing we used to do in the past, I remember, was I haven't done it yet this year. We've only started the season pretty much, 3 games in. When the players are used to you having a conversation with them about their individual player focus, one of our American players said to me on Saturday, like, I've never had that before. And play an individual focus, it's not like, yeah, we're just doubling down on your strength, mate, just putting it at the front of your mind. I'm not going to give you an individual player focus. Like, your job is not to like defend the low post well or seal in transition. Your strength is to be patient receiving screens and come off with separation and shoot every single time. That's your individual focus. So when they get used to that system, what we did previous years, you and I, was we'd ask the players to come up with their focus.
Mm.
So we shift the dial and they've got agency over it and they start to tell you their strengths then, which is even better again, instead of us reminding them,
Yeah.
they're reminding us.
It's interesting. This was a big game with some pressure attached to it, and that didn't feel like the time to give players
No,
that amount of autonomy. And they might not have even wanted it. They might have actually, ironically, sometimes want a bit of direction from the coach because it gives them a bit of confidence and it takes away some of their anxiety. Oh, I don't have to choose everything. The coach has narrowed my focus for me. I trust the coach. Therefore, I'll just do that. It can reduce anxiety for some players.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And also, early in the season, like it might be superficial if I try to create an individual player focus for all 12 players, instead of just categorizing forwards and guards at this early stage. It might be the best thing to do as their strengths emerge. We have a couple of new players in this team, as you know.
Mm.
So maybe I'm doing them a disservice by narrowing their focus on something. So again, it's a situational thing, it's a time thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, last topic to finish. Mark Bennett has introduced us to this phrase of capability combinations,
Mm.
which has resonated quite well. I've had quite a bit of feedback from that. So put that into your language with regard to this game. How did you plan for different scenarios? Like, what was your situational preparation, and how
Mm.
did that relate to lineup choices? Did you just make that up as you went along during the game in response to what you saw, or did you plan in advance for some likely scenarios or situations that you might face?
So the first thing I planned for is I opened the sheet where it's got it written. The first five, the lineup, I've got the first five, and then I have the next three sub rotations. So who's coming in after 4 minutes? So effectively the 6 minute mark. Who's coming in at the 7 minute mark, and who's coming in at the 9 minute mark? And I'm looking at who's playing with who. Is there a secure ball handler in each of those groups? Do Who's on the floor based on their starting five? So they started effectively. It messed me up a little bit, Simon, being honest, because they started with somebody I wasn't expecting,
Okay.
and we were expecting one of their. We weren't expecting their pick and pop five to start, and the rotation was going to be. I was going to bring one of our slower forwards who's a bit older than the rest and not as mobile as he used to be. I was going to bring him on when they brought on their slower center who's 6'11 and plays behind the 3 point line a lot. It didn't work out that way. So now, even though I planned for this, it kind of got skewed a little bit and I had to
Mm.
adjust on the fly. But in that case, I just tried to balance the minutes as much as possible because what we're trying to do is wear teams down over 40 minutes. So actually planning, not necessarily for the capability combinations, wasn't the priority. The priority was balancing minutes, where our top 3 or 4 players can still be fresh in the fourth period. Now, the other thing that had an impact on that was not just their starters, but foul situation. I brought one player from the bench, a backup, call him a backup forward, picked up 2 fouls in 30 seconds. It changed the whole dynamics of it again. So even though you plan for this stuff and you can plan for combination, you can plan for minutes and fatigue and rotations, you've got to be ready to adjust and plan B. What's your plan B?
What about likely tactical scenarios? So we're behind late and we need to implement a certain tactic. What's the best capability combination for that? Or we're losing the possession game. We need to
Yeah,
improve. I mean, this applies to a lot of team sports. We're losing possession.
yeah.
Okay, we need to go with this certain lineup. How useful is that? Because it sounds intuitive. It sounds like a good thing to do, but uh,
I
is
think
it
early in the
realistic to
season,
do that in advance?
I mean, I did it in the summer with the GB team, and the beauty of the GB team, and I guess the privilege of having you assist me in previous years. I don't have that this year. I didn't do any of this stuff. I was part of the planning for sure. It was co-collaborated, but like in the summer, I followed Polat's lead as we got through the preparation games because we had a system going. With you, I followed your lead, even though I'd have an input and so on. And then you guys, as assistants, were taking Polat and yourself. You took the reins in making those subs. I didn't have to put my focus there. Now I'm having to put my focus there this year. It's a lot more challenging as a coach. It's very good for me to go back to it because now I'm really seeing the value of having an assistant coach who has the competency, confidence, and ability to manage the rotations and adjustments if necessary based on fouls, based on starting five, based on injury, and so on. But as you'll know, Simon, in the past, we've planned for a more dynamic unit who can 5 guys who can full court press, 5 guys who can switch all actions. We've planned for a bigger lineup if there's a post presence, like tonight, for example, there will be a real size disadvantage for us. Well, we've got to find moments in the games where we got our bigger lineup on the floor trying to match their bigger lineup. But when their bigger guys go out, we're getting our bigger guys because we can be a bit more dynamic. Or if we're behind, who are the 5 best shooters in this team? And we're going to get up a lot of threes here and roll the dice in terms of hoping to make a good percentage of them. So yeah, you plan for those scenarios. The beauty of our card, and not to be promotional here,
Hmm.
there is 5 columns. The first column is the starters and the minutes. The next 4 will be the lineup adjustments based on needs, size, speed, defensive lineup.
Yeah.
Who's the zone busting lineup?
Hmm. Hmm. Okay. Well, that brings us to the end of this episode. I'll just summarize some takeaways for coaches. We've gone through the plan, do, review process. We've touched on some of the aspects of that for a basketball game. Planning your intention in advance. So addressing that question, what do the players, who do the players need me to be in this game? How am I going to think and act? and being intentional about that and writing that down. We've talked about the value of that, especially because it gives you something to review afterwards. We've touched on performance keys, having a balance in there. So there's some tech tac performance keys, but there's also mental and social performance keys for the game. We reviewed player focus and how to use that in quite a variety of different ways. We've gone through some situational preparation, capability combinations, etc., and a whole bunch of other stuff. So I hope that's helpful for coaches. Please feel free to stay in touch with us. We'd love to hear some comments on this episode. How do you plan for games? What questions do you have as a follow-up from this? And we'd love to highlight those in future episodes. So, Alan, thanks for joining me. Next week, we'll be back to our regular service with Mark Bennett. And we'll be producing some episodes soon with a couple of key guests that we've got. So we've got two in particular, really interesting guests lined up for the next 2-3 weeks. So thanks to everybody for watching.